out that most men are struggling today because there is a lack of balance between the ability for us to get out into our world, to get physical with things. We're not doing a lot of grounding work. We're not out in our physical environment actually physically involved in the work. We're spending a lot of time behind computer screens, on our phones, and so you see a lot of men dissatisfied because they're not seeing the challenge. Welcome to episode number 5 of the Soul Unchained Show, your source for meaningful conversations around spirituality and consciousness without the fluff. My name is Chris and Danielle, and I am joined by my co-host, newly minted international best-selling author, Danielle Laura. And today we're going to be discussing masculine and feminine energy. We're going to talk about traits of both. We're going to talk about common myths and misconceptions, along with ways in which you can harness both for your ultimate success. Remember to subscribe if you love what you hear, leave a like to help the channel, and check out our sponsor, Life Unchained. It's where Danielle and I work with aspiring visionaries and leaders and help them understand how to harness powerful principles to bring their purpose to life. Use promo code YouTube all caps for a $50 a month discount, and of course all links in the description below. But without further ado, let's get rolling. Welcome, Life Unchained family. We're here for episode number 5. Before we get started on today's topic, which I think is going to be a lot of fun to talk about, this is actually the beginning of our energy series. Episode 4, if you have not checked it out, we talked about how energy is your key to massive success. Of course, with Danielle being a energy healer and her concept of the energetic blueprint, the mastery level strategy you need to have in place for success in every area of your life. We're going to kind of go further down the rabbit hole with this today. And of course, on our show, we like to get into stuff raw, real, uncut. Before we get started, we are going to be talking today about the feminine masculine energy. And we had a huge win within the Life Unchained family because co-founder Danielle actually hit the Amazon bestsellers list with her book, Unleashing Her Wild, The Freeing Feminine Instinct and Intuition as Guides to an Awakened Life. So I would love for you to share a little bit about what's in the book and what people can expect. And then we're going to dive right into our topic.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. It was so exciting to hit the bestsellers list. Thank you so much, everybody, for your support. You guys were amazing in helping us get to the bestseller. So Unleashing Her Wild talks specifically about divine feminine energy. So in today's episode, we're talking about masculine and feminine energy. So if you guys do want to learn more specifically about divine feminine energy, we talk all about that in Unleashing Her Wild and how to really harness that as a guide to a more awakened life.
Awesome. And we're going to be talking about masculine and feminine energy today. So for the men out there too, I will tell you this, that obviously I had an opportunity to read this in advance. I can tell you that the authors of the stories in here shared some amazing raw experiences. It definitely gives you a great insight if you're in a relationship or looking to get into a relationship, but furthermore, the relationship to yourself, super crucial. Doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, but this gives you incredible insights. And you guys launched hard on the first day. I mean, you guys were ahead of like Deepak Chopra. You guys beat Tony Robbins' book. I mean, this book was flying into carts everywhere on Amazon. And this is one of 2 books, right?
Yeah.
Sweet. So we actually have a second book that Danielle's going to be launching this upcoming Tuesday. So if you're catching this, it is Sunday. Tuesday is going to be available. We'll put the links in the description down below so you guys can get a copy. This is really incredible. So
thank you.
Yeah.
So let's just dive in today. So we're going to be talking about masculine and feminine energy. And we want to make sure you understand we are not talking about gender, okay? Not male, female, not femininity or masculinity, simply energy, right? Masculine and feminine energy. And every single person has masculine and feminine energy within us, right? It's kind of known as like yin and yang, like dark and light, masculine and feminine. So we're going to go into the traits of what are characteristics of masculine energy and what are characteristics of feminine energy. And then we're going to talk about a whole bunch of other stuff, okay? Really good stuff. No fluff, just cutting straight to the point. So let's go into it. So masculine energy is the energy of doing. It's the energy of logic, of striving, of achieving, of going, of meeting the goal, exceeding the goal, on to the next goal, right? It is very driven. It is the energy of accomplishment, essentially, right? And then feminine energy is all about flow and intuition. It's that more of creative energy of really tuning in and allowing that to flow, right? It's the more passive, the receiving type of energy. So learning how to harness the power of both of these energies to work in unison together is where the power is, right? That is where the ultimate success lies in your life. I've seen this in my own life. I've seen this in the lives of my clients. I've seen this in your life as well, as you started to really harness the balance of both of those. And the thing is that typically we're kind of imbalanced in one or the other. We're either masculine dominant or feminine dominant. And we're going to talk about what that looks like, how that shows up in your life. So, Chris, I know you work a lot with men, right? So, what are some like myths, basically, or misconceptions, essentially, about energy and the imbalances that you've seen in your work?
Yeah, so I do work a lot with men, but I do find a lot of women are actually attracted to the kind of work I do too, because I do talk a lot about how the integration between your business, your purpose, interplays with your relationships. I mean, we go into the full picture, as I know you do too, but I started recognizing as I started learning more intuitively about the masculine feminine energy for myself that I started seeing where burnout was happening for me. And I started seeing some interesting things too. So when I was actually, thinking about entrepreneurship years ago, before I even knew how to get started or anything else, I remember watching things like the Shark Tank. I watched things like The Profit, and I read articles on LinkedIn a lot about characteristics of CEOs. And one of the things I saw was this ability of CEOs to trust their gut and their intuition. It was like across the board.
Right.
And I started realizing as I learned more about the masculine feminine energy balance that the intuition side was a deeply feminine trait.
Right.
The ability to execute on the intuition was a deeply masculine trait.
Right.
And so it just made sense and it clicked. And I started realizing as well and started seeing patterns in, my own experiences of growing up, especially in our school systems and the way we are in the United States. It's very much a grind and hustle glorified culture.
Yeah.
Having so many hours of the day, working, and it's a badge of honor almost. It's like, I'm so exhausted. I've worked 20 hours today. And we see burnout. So in the lives of my clients, I'm really teaching them strategies and we're digging into things that also worked for me. And so it's really intuitive work to find out that most men are struggling today because there is a lack of balance between the ability for us to get out into our world, to get physical with things. We're not doing a lot of grounding work. We're not out in our physical environment, actually physically involved in the work. We're spending a lot of time behind computer screens, on our phones. And so you see a lot of men dissatisfied because they're not seeing the challenge. They like the strategy side of things, but they're not seeing the actual tangible, and men are external relators. We love brotherhood. We love being around each other, but we don't have that right now. On the flip side of that, there's also a lot of things in our society right now, especially in the Western world, that we almost make men feel bad for having feminine traits. I know I remember growing up as a kid as well, like I'm a feeler. I'm deeply emotional, but on the external side of things, I'm very stoic sometimes because that's what I learned growing up was that men don't cry, right? Men don't cry. And listen, if you're a good man, you just simply drink a few beers and you stuff those feelings down because there's work to be done and you suffer in silence. So dispelling that myth and allowing a lot of men to open up to that and a lot of women to realize that you do need to tap into that feminine energy too. Because I see a lot of women actually struggle with this where they're in this world where they almost feel like they have to get out and they have to provide, they have to do all the physical labor work, they have the kids, they have all these things going on. And then there's an imbalance because you can see it from the collective side of things. There's a massive mistrust between the masculine and feminine energy right now.
Yeah.
So it kind of falls in line with that law of correspondence of so below or so above, so below, and you see it all over the place. So those imbalances are very evident. You see a lot of people who are feeling deeply disconnected. You see a lot of people who are feeling very lonely.
Yeah.
And the other side of it too, and this is a major misconception, I think, is this idea that masculine and feminine energy is just male or female. We don't realize that we have energy within us that needs to be balanced too. So can you kind of talk a little bit about how that's played out for you, maybe with clients as well, and the energy work that you're doing and the healing process and the coaching as well?
Yeah. So, like you were saying, sometimes we can have either masculine dominant energy or feminine dominant energy, right? Again, this has nothing to do with gender, right? So if you were a masculine dominant energy, some examples that you were using, Chris, is like you, with your male clients, particularly is what you were talking about. But what I see a lot too, whether it's male or female, is that the masculine dominant energy is one that is the overachiever, the high performer, the go, go, go. You never stop. You never rest. You are always on to the next thing. You meet the goal, you exceed the goal, and you're on to the next goal. There's no really time for downtime. If you're that person that never rests, never takes a break, hasn't gone on vacation in 5 years, chances are you have a very masculine dominant energy. And I also want to know there's nothing bad or good or bad with either of these, right? It just is, right? It just is. So coming to the acknowledgement of what your dominant energy is and learning how to harness the power of both, that's what we're talking about today. So then if you have a very feminine dominant energy, you are probably much more of a creative, of a feeler of emotion. You might be really into music, your job, your career might be creative. You're very intuitive, like the healers out there, right? Usually very feminine dominant energy. And so you're prone to really almost be not taking action, right? You're so in your feminine, you're so in that intuitive feeling mode that you kind of lead with emotion over strategy, right? Whereas the masculine dominant energy leads with strategy and is almost shut down to emotion, right? It's very A plus B equals C. And the feminine dominant energy is very much like A plus Z plus apples and squares all equals end result, right? It's very much all tied in. So, so let's just go into how can you really embody and embrace your energy, and how can you harness the power of the opposite energy, right? So, if, for example, if you are very masculine dominant in your energy, you never take a break, you go, 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 you strive, all of that, how can you begin to start cultivating that feminine energy and bringing that in? So what that looks like is doing things that bring you joy. So for the easiest thing you could do, step away from the computer, right? Step away from all of the work and do something, even if it's 20 minutes, right? Of something that brings you joy, something that allows you to connect back to yourself. If that means you going into nature, if that means meditation, if that means dancing, if that means, even just making your environment a beautiful place when you do work. For example, like lighting candles or having a diffuser going or playing great music in the background, something that makes you feel like, oh, you're getting to do this. Like it gets to be fun. You're in that energy of flow rather than the energy of I have to do this, right? Because that feels very rigid and to the point. So making it more fluid, even making your workspace more fluid. You can even redecorate, right? Simply doing little things to help pull in that feminine energy to where you feel like you're more in flow. You feel like when you're sitting down to work, you're actually getting to do it, that it's coming from that soul-centered space rather than just, hammering it out in your mind kind of thing, right? And then cultivating those things of joy. And I see so many times when people who have a masculine feminine energy, who begin to cultivate these things and try new things. Like one of my clients, for example, started painting. She never has painted before in her life. She's like, whatever. She was very masculine dominant in her energy. And she's like, hey, I'm going to try these creative things. She started painting. All of a sudden, she's a beautiful painter because she's allowing her intuition to flow through her while she's painting. And she's doing these like beautiful pieces that she never knew she even had that ability, right? Because it was shut down. She was disconnected from her emotion completely. But as she tapped into her feminine energy, the energy of creativity, of intuition, of flow, of ease, this beauty started coming into her life, this joy, this newfound sense of like ease, right? And it was really, really beautiful.
Well, let's talk a little bit too, because we talked about again, just so we treat this very open and raw. We're not saying that, and again, this is a paradigm shift. We're not talking about masculinity as the news talks about it, or as you're seeing other folks talk about it. We're not talking about feminism. We are talking about the constructs of the actual energy, that which is, right? And if you're listening to this, obviously, we're talking about how these things interplay in the various aspects of our life. This is the most important thing. Because there is this concept, we talked a lot about how if you're over masculine, and let's be real, most of us, even if we don't know anything about energy, we are living in a very masculine dominant world in a way, because we're taught to compete a ton. We're all taught, both sexes, both genders, both everything, we're taught to compete all throughout our teenage years. And now we have this heavy focus on entrepreneurship, which a lot of folks think is very much about cutthroat competition and competitive advantage versus understanding about collaboration, understanding about strategic partnerships. Let's talk a little bit, and I would love to share maybe some of the dominant feminine energies and how those come across sometimes too. And I also know that many people are probably waiting for that famous T word, right? The toxic masculine and feminine. We hear so much about it. So we'll talk about that for a second too. But the over feminine energy sometimes I found for me is that I almost find myself in a place of, like when I got into meditation first, right? I got into meditation and I had gone from this place of a masculine dominant energy where it was very much, if I didn't see it, it wasn't real. I had to see it in my external world. The masculine is very externally focused and the feminine is very internally focused. And so that switch almost felt really uncomfortable, because in that process of embracing the feminine energy, I almost felt like I wasn't doing anything at all. I almost felt lazy. I almost felt like I was giving up, but I guess that's really what surrender really is, right? And what was happening was I was kind of strengthening a muscle and trusting something that I never trusted or built before, which was tapping into intuition, which when you go through that process, you are in that place where you're in disbelief. You're like, I'm seeing things, I'm hearing things, like what's really happening here? Is this bullshit? Is this for real? And so what ended up happening was I almost went too much into the feminine energy. And so we want to think of this in a way that it's like a continuum, right? It's the poles. This is polarity. So it's neither right nor wrong. It just is. And so the goal here isn't to be, too extreme on one end or the other. It's to be in the middle as possible and be able to tap in sometimes when we have to, right? It's like when you create a character in a video game. It's like you have these characteristics. When I was a kid playing these games, it was like, do I want strength? Do I want dexterity? Do I want intelligence? You find these avenues where you can build like the perfect time. That's where intention comes in. Like today I have to tap into my feminine energy. I have to create. I get to create, right? I'm going to throw a diffuser on and I'm going to throw some music on. And sometimes for me too, it's like today is a heavy focus day on work and creation. Tomorrow I know I need to fill up with human connection. I need to be around people. And so if you're finding yourself though in a place where you feel like whatever I'm going to do is going to get judged and I'm not taking that next step because I'm fearful, we're going to talk a little bit about how that might be an overexpression of toxic feminine energy. And then the other side of things, when I feel like I have to dominate, conquer, and overcome the struggle, how that might be playing into toxic masculinity. And we're not talking about how masculine itself is toxic. We're talking about the traits and characteristics of that massive imbalance. How do you see that show up, and how has that shown up for you maybe, or some ideas for clients too, where it might be periods of time where you felt like you were too much in that period of time where it might be like harming your life or your progression by being too much in that feminine or masculine energy before?
Right. So, I see this a lot when you're too much in your masculine energy, you're very prone to burnout, right? Like I said earlier, you don't rest. You are always on the go. You're always on to the next thing. So being kind of almost living in that state of constant exhaustion, which also leads to unfulfillment, right? So if you have that twinge where you're just feeling unfulfilled, you're like, there's got to be more than this. Or, oh my gosh, this thing that I thought I loved, I'm now resentful of it and dreading. Key indicator that you are probably operating in your masculine dominant energy, and you need to kind of bring some of your feminine energy back in to make it more of a joyful and playful and fun experience, right? And then conversely, when you're too in your feminine, you kind of swing to the other way. You're all in your feels, right? You're all intuition. You're like, I'm just going to feel it to the moment. I'm not going to plan. That feels restrictive. I'm just going to do whatever I feel in the moment, right? And I've been there, and I've been on both ends of the extreme, and I finally learned how to harness the balance of both of these, which is why we're talking about this. But so if you're leaning into that feminine almost too much, a result of that is probably not getting anything done, right? So particularly if you're a business and if you're an entrepreneur, which we talk a lot to entrepreneurs here, this could look like having a lot of amazing ideas, but not actually taking action on any of them, right? So nothing is actually coming to fruition from all of these brilliant intuitive downloads you're getting.
But what is the thing that stops it? Do you feel like it's almost like I want to give people an idea of like what it feels like? Because I almost feel like sometimes it's, the moment I do this, I'm going to get judged. The moment I do this, or it's not going to work out. It's almost like this back and forth that ends in the burnout, because it's like you're arguing about the idea instead of just surrendering to the process, right? What do you think about that?
I think it's leading too much I would say it's leading solely with emotion, right? So it's like lead with your heart, but also bring your head with you, right? Bring your head and your heart, allow those to mesh together so you can actually bring the thing to life. Just sitting there feeling about it, thinking great about it is great, right? That puts you in a beautiful vibrational state, but nothing's going to get done. So that's when you have to bring your masculine energy, harness the power of that to put a strategy or a system in place to where you can bring forth this amazing, beautiful idea that you have to life, right? So people in their feminine typically don't have, or in their feminine dominant energy, typically don't have structure. Right? So if you're really dominant in your feminine energy, then a really great thing for you to do is have structure in place. Set a schedule, right? A lot of people I hear a lot of times, and I went through a phase of this as well, and I'm like, oh, a schedule feels so restrictive. Like, no, I just want to listen to my intuition every moment, right? Which is beautiful. But Have those days, have the days that you, for example, if you want to do like a Tuesday and a Thursday, that you have a couple of hours, like 4 hours out of the day, that is just your flow time, right? Where you can dream and you can have the brainstorm and all of that. And then also have time in your schedule throughout the week where you have action, right? Where you are putting into action the strategy that is going to need to bring this idea to life in the best way possible, to have the greatest return on your investment and your energy.
Yeah, and I know that sometimes this can be a little bit confusing because there's layers to this, right? There's the collective layer of what the energy is, right? There's the societal, and then there's going down all the way down to the individual, the internal, right? So it's all deeply scaled. And in this series, what we're going to do, I think maybe we should do other episodes on how it impacts directly.
Yeah.
Because I know many people are out there like, what about relationships?
Oh yeah, we'll do. I think it would be, there's so much to cover in one session. This could be hours worth, even just on this one intro topic, right? So today we are just covering intro to what is masculine energy, what is feminine energy, how can you learn if you're imbalanced, how can you learn to harness them to work in unison together. I think it would be really great also if we go into in other episodes. This is going to be a series on energy where we're going to talk about how your energy specifically affects your relationships, affects your work, affects your own creativity, your money, right? Your abundance, your income.
I mean, what if the imbalance of your masculine and feminine was literally stopping you from the income that you desire? Because that plays a major role for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Sometimes that whole concept of like, if my bills aren't paid, how do I even make sense of this stuff?
Right.
And so there's so much to go into, and that's why I love the idea of digging into masculine and feminine energy, because there's just so much out there, right? And there's just so much conversation about what it is. Here's what I want to share with you guys. It's what you make of it. So first and foremost, again, Danielle said it's not right or wrong. This is all about what you intuitively feel, and you make it your own. You define it for yourself. There's just universal truths that kind of hit across the board with the traits, right?
Yeah, it's coming to the awareness, basically. That's what this episode is trying to help you, is coming to the awareness of, oh my gosh, energies, I have both of these within me. Which one might be dominant for me? And how can I harness the power of the non-dominant to work in unison so that I have balance, right? That's what this is all about.
And so I think to end this episode, I think, of course, we always want to go into our 3 steps that you can use immediately. Make sure that you're taking care of using these steps, because the information is nothing without taking it and actually applying it into your week this week. Of course, if you have any questions, always comment down below. That's a great way for us to understand, like, as our subscriber base grows, make sure you let us know what's going on for you so that we can help serve you the best way possible. But I think the 3 steps really are going to hit a big E word, right?
Yeah.
That word of embodiment.
Right.
And I think embodiment is that thing that doesn't get talked about a lot because people talk so much about information. But I think maybe the 3 steps this week we can talk about how can you begin to take this information and actually embody.
Yeah.
So what would be some great steps that we can take? What would step 1 for you be, you think, for the embodiment?
I would say step 1, embodiment of understanding your energy, is becoming consciously aware of where you may have imbalance, right? Identify for you, what is your dominant energy? Do you have a more masculine dominant energy or a more feminine dominant energy? Step 1, start there. Identify your dominant energy.
Yeah, I think step 2, I'm a big fan, and this is a masculine trait, but create a plan, right? Because it doesn't matter what we do, we need to have that plan. The first step, being aware of it, creates clarity. And I love Mark Miller said this in Chess Not Checkers. He says, urgency is a gift, or clarity is a gift because it creates urgency in action. So take a look and actually grab your calendar out. Now, if you don't have a calendar, congratulations. First step, create a calendar, right? Use Google Calendar or something like that. Begin to find times in your day. Now, don't fall into the trap that I did, which is, if I don't get a workout for an hour and a half in a commercial gym, then clearly I'm not going to work out. There's a trampoline behind us right now that, like, if I need to, I go step over there and I jump on that for like a minute, tell Alexa, turn it on, we'll jump on there. So make sure you create a plan. And the other side of it too is, especially for the men out there, draw a bath or something. Throw some Epsom salts in a bath. There's nothing more masculine, right, than getting in hot water to actually restore your body, right? So get in there and make that happen. Find the areas and just add 1 or 2 things this week, but create a plan around it and protect that time. If you have kids, if you have a job, if you're aspiring entrepreneurs that are kind of transitioning, just make sure that you protect that time as if it was one of the most important meetings of your day. and I'll let you take the last
Yeah,
one.
and I would say step 3, finally embrace it and embody it, right? If you have come to the realization that you're, for example, you have a feminine dominant energy, right? Even if you're a man, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Again, this has nothing to do with gender. Embrace that this is who you are and allow yourself to now embody and bring in the other energy to help you bring balance into your energy field so that you're actually working with harnessing all of the power that you are, right? To have the ultimate success in your life. So begin to practice that more and more. Don't just do it for one day. Don't just try one thing this week to harness the power of the other energy and then never touch it again.
Mm-hmm.
Begin to do it. Actually implement this into your life. Allow this to be a way of being for you to where you can embody this, because I tell you what, my life drastically changed. I quantum shifted my reality. Everything skyrocketed in my life when I learned to harness the power of both my masculine and feminine energy to work in unison together. And I've seen this in hundreds of my clients, and I know you have as well.
Yeah, so this is a big episode, right? Digest it, take some time with it, take notes, right? Share this with somebody you know who needs to hear this. The channel grows. If you guys do smash that thumbs up button, make sure you hit the bell because we're going to be releasing content every Sunday. The channel is also going to be growing with smaller pieces of content throughout the week. We have big plans in the works for that as well. If you guys have not yet checked it out, make sure you guys do go to Amazon. Again, there's going to be a link in the description below for Unleashing Her Wild. I'll tell you what, if you want to learn about the Divine Feminine, we're going to kind of talk about that maybe in one of the episodes, the Sacred Masculine, the Divine Feminine. And we're going to dispel and make this tangible for us to understand in this 3D reality. So with that being said, I always love to say that greatness is not a matter of chance, it's a matter of intention. We appreciate everybody who's on the channel and watching this content and sharing it, liking it, and subscribing, guys. We love y'all, and we can't wait to see you next week. Take care.